Part 1. The Trade. The Arizona sun burned hot that summer day in 1872. Chief Naiche stood in the center of his camp, watching the dust clouds rise in the distance. A traveling trader was coming, and with him came trouble that Naiche didn't want to face. Naiche was a respected leader among the Chiricahua Apache. His people looked up to him, trusted his decisions, and followed him into battle without question. But today, he felt a weight in his chest that had nothing to do with warfare or leadership. Today was about something that made him uncomfortable, even though he would never admit it out loud. His warhorse, Thunderfoot, stood tied nearby. The animal was magnificent, black as midnight with a white streak down his face, strong muscles rippling under his coat. That horse had been with Naiche for 7 years. They had ridden together through dangerous raids, escaped from army soldiers, and crossed desert lands that would kill lesser animals. Thunderfoot knew his master's thoughts before Naiche even pulled the reins. They were partners, not just rider and horse. The trader arrived with his wagon and a group of people walking behind it. These were captives, people taken from Mexican villages during raids by other bands. The trader made money by selling them to anyone who would pay. It was an ugly business, and Naiche had always avoided it before, but his warriors had been pressing him for weeks. The camp needed help. The women were overworked, struggling to keep up with cooking, preparing hides, gathering food, and caring for children. They needed another pair of hands. His senior warriors kept telling him that a leader should provide for his people, and that meant getting someone to help with the work. Naiche had resisted for a long time. Something about the whole thing felt wrong to him, like a stone sitting heavy in his stomach. But the pressure kept building, and finally he gave in. He told the trader to come to their camp. Now the trader was showing his captives, talking fast, pointing out the strong ones who could work hard. Naiche barely listened. His mind was somewhere else, anywhere else but here. Then he saw her. A woman standing at the back of the group, separate from the others somehow, even though she was chained like the rest. She didn't look down at the ground like the others did. She stood straight, her shoulders back, her eyes looking forward at nothing and everything at once. The trader noticed Naiche's attention. That one. Her name is Elena Morales. She's a widow, 28 years old. Her husband died 6 months ago. She's a hard worker, knows medicine and healing, good with her hands. Naiche looked at Elena more carefully. She was thin, too thin, like she hadn't eaten properly in weeks. Her dress was torn and dusty from the long walk. Her hands were rough and calloused from hard work, but it was her eyes that caught his attention. They were dark brown, almost black, and they held something he recognized. Pain. Deep, soul-crushing pain that no amount of time could heal. He knew that look because he had seen it in his own reflection after losing people he loved in battle. The trader kept talking, naming his price. It was high, too high for most people to pay. But then he looked at Thunderfoot. "That's a fine horse you have there, Chief. Best war horse I've seen in years. I'll tell you what. Give me that horse and the woman is yours. Fair trade." Naiche felt like someone had punched him in the chest. His horse? Thunderfoot? The trader wanted him to give up his trusted companion, his partner in survival, for a human being he didn't know and didn't want. His warriors were watching. They had pushed for this, and now they waited to see what he would do. A chief couldn't show weakness. A chief couldn't refuse when his people needed something. A chief had to make hard decisions, but this decision felt wrong in every way. Naiche walked over to Thunderfoot and placed his hand on the horse's neck. The animal turned his head and nuzzled against Naiche's shoulder, the way he always did. They understood each other perfectly. How could he trade away 7 years of loyalty and trust? He looked back at Elena. She was watching him now, really watching him. Her eyes met his, and for a moment they just stared at each other. He expected to see pleading in her expression, begging him not to buy her, or maybe hoping he would so her suffering would end. But he saw neither. She just looked at him with a kind of quiet strength that unsettled him. "Done," Naiche heard himself say. His own voice sounded strange to his ears, like someone else was speaking. "Take the horse. The woman stays." The trader grinned, showing missing teeth. He quickly moved before Naiche could change his mind. He unlocked Elena's chains and pushed her forward, then grabbed Thunderfoot's reins. Naiche watched his horse being led away. Thunderfoot looked back at him, confused, not understanding why his master wasn't coming. The horse tried to pull back, but the trader was experienced. He got the animal moving, and soon they were heading down the trail. disappearing into the same dust clouds they had arrived from. The camp erupted in satisfied chatter. The warriors nodded their approval. The women came forward to take Elena and put her to work. Everyone seemed happy with the trade except two people. Nietzsche stood there feeling like he had just cut off his own arm. The practical part of his mind said he did the right thing. His people needed help and he provided it. That was leadership. That was responsibility. But another part of him, a part he usually ignored, felt sick. He had just traded a loyal animal who trusted him completely for a human being, as if people were things to be bought and sold like blankets or weapons. What kind of honor was that? Elena hadn't moved when the women approached her. She stood still, looking at the ground now, her moment of strength seeming to fade. But Nietzsche noticed her hands. They were clenched into fists so tight her knuckles had turned white. She was holding on to something inside herself, something that wouldn't break no matter what happened to her. As the sun began to set that evening, Nietzsche sat alone outside his dwelling. He could hear the normal sounds of camp life around him. Children playing, women talking, men discussing the next hunting trip. Everything was as it should be. Everything except the empty space where Thunderfoot should have been tied up for the night. Nietzsche had made many difficult decisions in his life. He had chosen to attack when it seemed impossible to win. He had chosen to retreat when his pride wanted to fight. He had chosen who would live and who would die in moments of danger. But this decision, this trade, felt different from all the others. For the first time in his life as a chief, Nietzsche wondered if being a leader meant making the right choice, or just making the choice everyone expected him to make, and he wasn't sure he knew the difference anymore. Part 2. The Silent Rebellion. 3 weeks had passed since Elena arrived at the Apache camp, and Nietzsche couldn't stop watching her, not in the way a man watches a woman he finds attractive, but in the way you watch something that doesn't make sense, something that puzzles you. She should have been broken by now. Other captives who came to Apache camps usually took one of two paths. Either they became quiet and obedient, moving through their days like ghosts with no life in their eyes, or they became desperate and tried to escape, only to be caught and punished. But Elena did neither. Every morning before the sun came up, she was already awake. She would start the fire, using the skills she clearly learned long before coming here. Her movements were efficient, practiced. She never wasted energy or time. She prepared corn cakes and whatever meat was available, seasoning it with wild herbs she gathered herself. The women in the camp had been suspicious of her at first. Captives were usually kept at a distance given the worst jobs, treated as outsiders. But Elena didn't wait for acceptance. She simply worked alongside them, helping without being asked, offering her hands when someone struggled with a heavy load. What amazed Nietzsche most was that she never begged, never cried where anyone could see, never tried to make herself small or invisible. She looked people in the eye when they spoke to her. She stood straight even when she was exhausted. She carried herself like a free woman, not a servant. One afternoon, Nietzsche was sitting outside his dwelling, sharpening his knife, when he heard a commotion. One of the younger warriors, a hot-headed man named Delgado, was shouting at Elena near the water containers. Nietzsche stood up to see what was happening. Delgado was angry because Elena had used water to wash vegetables before asking permission. In his mind, a captive shouldn't make decisions about how to use camp resources. He stepped close to her, trying to intimidate her with his size and anger. But Elena didn't step back. She didn't lower her eyes. She just stood there looking directly at Delgado with an expression that was completely calm. It wasn't defiance exactly. It was something else. Something that said she recognized his anger but refused to be afraid of it. "You will learn your place," Delgado said, raising his hand as if to strike her. Elena still didn't move. She just kept looking at him with those dark, steady eyes. And somehow, in that moment, Delgado was the one who looked small. He was the one who looked like he was doing something shameful. His hand slowly dropped. He muttered something under his breath and walked away, leaving Elena standing by the water containers. The whole camp had watched this happen. The women exchanged glances. The other warriors looked uncomfortable, and Nietzsche felt something strange twist in his chest. This woman who owned nothing, who had no weapons, who had no power at all in this camp, had just won a battle without speaking a single word. That evening, Nietzsche found himself thinking about strength. He had always believed strength came from fighting ability, from courage in battle, from the number of raids you survived. But watching Elena made him question that belief. She had a different kind of strength, one that didn't need weapons or loud voices. A few days later, one of the camp's children fell and badly scraped his knee. The cut was deep, bleeding heavily, and the child was screaming in pain. His mother tried to help but didn't know what to do. The wound needed proper care or it could become infected. Elena appeared as if from nowhere. She knelt beside the crying child and spoke to him softly in Spanish. The boy didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. It was gentle, calming, like a mother soothing a frightened baby. She asked for clean water and clean cloth. While someone fetched these things, she held her hand over the wound, applying pressure to stop the bleeding. When the supplies came, she cleaned the cut carefully, her hands moving with the confidence of someone who had done this many times before. From a small pouch she kept tied to her waist, she pulled out dried herbs. She crushed them between her fingers, mixing them with a little water to make a paste. She applied this to the wound, then wrapped it with the clean cloth. The whole time she kept talking to the boy in that soft voice, distracting him from the pain. When she finished, the child had stopped crying. His mother looked at Elena with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. Captives weren't supposed to be skilled healers. They weren't supposed to save Apache children with medicine knowledge that matched or exceeded their own. Naiche watched all of this from a distance. He learned that Elena's husband had been a healer in their village. She had worked beside him for 10 years, learning everything he knew about plants, wounds, and sickness. When bandits attacked their village and killed him, she lost not just her husband but her partner in healing work. That night, Naiche couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the trade he had made. He had given up Thunderfoot, a loyal war horse, for a servant to help with camp work. But Elena wasn't just a servant. She was a healer, a woman with valuable knowledge that could save lives. She was also someone who had lost everything but refused to lose herself. He thought about honor, a word he used often but was starting to understand differently. Was there honor in owning another person? His people had always taken captives. It was part of Apache tradition, part of survival. But tradition didn't always mean something was right. The next morning, Naiche made an unusual decision. He told the camp that Elena was under his personal protection. No one was to harm her or treat her poorly. She would continue her work, but she was to be respected for her healing skills. Some of the warriors grumbled about this. They thought he was showing too much favor to a captive. But Naiche was the chief and his word was law. Elena heard about this order, though Naiche never spoke to her directly about it. The next time their eyes met across the camp, something passed between them. Not words, but an understanding. He was starting to see her as a person, not a possession. And she was starting to see that maybe, just maybe, this Apache chief had a conscience that troubled him. Days turned into weeks, and the dynamic in the camp slowly shifted. The women began asking Elena for advice about medicine. When someone had a headache or a stomach pain, they came to her. She always helped, never asking for anything in return, never using her knowledge as a bargaining tool for better treatment. Naiche found himself seeking her out, though he told himself it was just to check on camp matters. He would ask if she had everything she needed for her healing work. She would answer simply, never requesting more than necessary. Their conversations were brief but began to happen more regularly. One evening, as Elena prepared the evening meal, Naiche sat nearby, ostensibly checking his weapons. But really, he was thinking about a question that had been bothering him for days. Finally, he spoke. "You could make your life easier here," he said, not looking directly at her. "You could try harder to please people, make them like you. Instead, you challenge them with your eyes." Elena continued her work for a moment before responding. "Would you respect me more if I crawled? If I begged? If I pretended to be less than I am?" Naiche had no answer to that. Because the truth was, her strength was exactly what made him notice her. Her refusal to be diminished was what made her different from anyone else he had ever known. "My husband taught me something," Elena continued, her voice soft but clear. "He said that people can take everything from you. Your home, your freedom, your loved ones, but they cannot take who you are inside unless you let them. So I will not let them." In that moment, Naiche understood why trading Thunderfoot for this woman was perhaps not the mistake he thought it was. His horse had been loyal and strong. But Elena was teaching him something no horse ever could. She was teaching him that true strength had nothing to do with power over others. True strength was keeping your dignity when everything else was stripped away. And that lesson was worth more than any war horse ever could be. Part 3. The Lesson of Medicine. The sickness came without warning, the way the worst things always do. One morning, a small girl named Little Bird woke up burning with fever. By afternoon, her younger brother was sick too. By evening, 3 more children in the camp were showing the same symptoms. Panic spread faster than the illness itself. The Apache had seen fevers like this before. Sometimes they passed quickly, leaving everyone tired but alive. Other times, they swept through camps like wildfire, taking the young and the old, leaving grief in their wake. The camp's medicine man had died the previous winter, an old man who took his knowledge to the grave because he had never finished training his replacement. Now they had no one who knew the sacred rituals, no one who understood which plants could fight fever, no one who could sing the healing songs. Nietzsche watched his people grow desperate. Mothers held their sick children, tears streaming down their faces, not knowing what to do. The elderly men tried to remember what the medicine man used to do, but memory was not the same as knowledge. They burned sage and said prayers, but the children kept getting worse. On the second day, Little Bird's fever spiked so high that she started having convulsions. Her small body shook violently while her mother screamed for someone to help. The whole camp gathered around, but no one knew what to do. They could only watch in horror as the little girl suffered. Then Elena pushed through the crowd. She had been watching from a distance, staying quiet as she always did when it came to Apache spiritual matters. But now, seeing the child dying, something in her broke open. "Let me try," she said. Her voice was quiet but firm. "I know medicine. I can help." The crowd turned to look at her. Some faces showed hope. Others showed suspicion. One of the senior warriors, an old man named Grey Wolf, stepped forward. "You are not Apache," he said. "Your medicine might anger the spirits. It might make things worse." Elena looked directly at him. "Right now, your children are dying. Your spirits have not stopped the sickness. What is there to lose by letting me try?" It was bold, almost disrespectful. But it was also true. Nietzsche, who had been standing at the edge of the crowd, made a decision. "Let her work," he said. "If the children die, they will die whether she helps or not. But if she can save them, we will have acted with wisdom, not fear." Grey Wolf looked unhappy but stepped back. Nietzsche's word was law, even when the old warrior disagreed with it. Elena knelt beside Little Bird. She placed her hand on the child's forehead, feeling the dangerous heat. She had seen this kind of fever before in her village. She knew it could kill, but she also knew it could be fought if treated quickly and correctly. "I need clean water as much as you can get," she said. "I need cloth for cooling, and I need to gather herbs from the land around camp. Someone needs to come with me to help carry them." 2 women volunteered immediately. They were mothers of sick children, willing to trust anyone who offered hope. Elena led them away from camp, moving quickly but carefully, searching the ground and the bushes for specific plants. She found wild mint, which could help reduce fever. She found yarrow, which would help the body fight infection. She found willow bark, which her husband had taught her was nature's gift against pain and heat. She gathered everything carefully, explaining to the women what each plant did, teaching them even in this moment of crisis. Back at camp, Elena set up a working space near the sick children. She boiled water and made it cool enough to drink but still warm. She crushed the herbs, mixing them in exact amounts her husband had taught her years ago. She made a tea that smelled bitter and strong. "This will taste bad," she told Little Bird's mother, "but you must make her drink it. Small sips every few minutes, even if she fights you." While the mother worked on getting medicine into her daughter, Elena prepared cool cloths soaked in mint water. She placed them on Little Bird's forehead, chest, and arms. The coolness would help bring down the fever from the outside while the herbs fought it from the inside. She moved to the next child, then the next, working without stopping. She showed the mothers exactly what to do, turning them into her assistants, teaching them her methods. She never rested, never ate, never complained about being tired. Nietzsche watched her work through that entire night. He saw how gentle she was with the children, how patient with the worried parents, how focused on every detail. She sang to the sick children, soft Spanish songs he didn't understand but that seemed to calm them. She checked each child every hour, feeling their foreheads, looking at their eyes, listening to their breathing. "The fever will break," she told him during one of her brief pauses, "but it takes time. They must drink the medicine regularly. They must stay cool." and we must watch them constantly. How do you know it will break? Nietzsche asked. How can you be certain? Elena looked at him with tired eyes. I'm not certain. Medicine is not magic. Sometimes, despite everything we do, people die. But I have seen this fever before. I know that these herbs help. I know that cooling the body helps. And I know that giving up helps no one. 3 days and 3 nights Elena worked without real sleep. She took short naps only when mothers promised to wake her if anything changed. She checked on each child personally, adjusting their medicine, changing their cooling cloths, encouraging the parents to keep hope alive. On the morning of the 4th day, Little Bird opened her eyes. Her fever had broken during the night. She was weak and tired, but she was alive. Her mother wept with joy, holding her daughter close. Within hours, the other children began to improve too. The crisis was passing. The camp erupted in relief and celebration. Parents thanked Elena with tears and embraces. The women who had helped her felt pride in what they had learned. Even old Grey Wolf came to her, his face softening with respect. You have saved Apache children, he said simply. You have given life when we expected death. This is powerful medicine. Elena was so exhausted she could barely stand, but she managed a small smile. It is not my medicine. It is medicine my husband taught me. Knowledge passed down through generations. Healing belongs to everyone who is willing to learn it. Nietzsche helped her back to her dwelling. She was swaying on her feet, ready to collapse. As she sat down, he brought her water and food. You didn't have to do this, he said. These are not your people. You owe us nothing. You could have let them die. Elena looked up at him, surprise clear on her face. Let children die? What kind of person do you think I am? They are innocent. Their sickness is not their fault, and their suffering is real regardless of what tribe they belong to. But we are your captors, Nietzsche said, struggling to understand. We took your freedom. Yes, Elena agreed. And that is wrong. But adding more wrong to the world by letting children die would not make anything right. 2 wrongs never make a right. That's what my husband used to say. Nietzsche sat in silence, absorbing her words. He had grown up believing in clear lines between friend and enemy, between his people and others. But Elena was showing him that some things crossed all lines. Healing was one of them. Compassion was another. Basic human decency was a third. Over the following days, the change in camp was remarkable. The women began treating Elena differently. She was no longer just a captive. She was the healer who had saved their children. They brought her small gifts, extra food, a better blanket. They asked her to teach them about medicine, and she agreed eagerly, happy to pass on knowledge that could help others. The warriors, even those who had been suspicious before, now nodded respectfully when she passed. She had proven her worth in a way they couldn't argue with. She had saved Apache lives when she could have simply stayed quiet and let fate take its course. But the biggest change was in Nietzsche himself. He found himself thinking about Elena's words constantly, about right and wrong, about how 2 wrongs never make a right, about how innocent people shouldn't suffer regardless of tribal conflicts or traditions. He began watching how other captives in the camp were treated. He noticed things he had never paid attention to before. The fear in their eyes, the way they flinched when warriors came near, the hopelessness that hung over them like a dark cloud, and for the first time in his life he felt ashamed of traditions he had never questioned before. One evening, Elena was preparing medicine for the children who were still recovering. Nietzsche approached her, something weighing heavy on his mind. What you did for those children, he began, choosing his words carefully. It showed more honor than any battle I've ever fought. Elena paused in her work, looking at him with those penetrating dark eyes. Honor is not about fighting, she said gently. Honor is about doing the right thing even when it costs you something, even when no one is watching, even when it would be easier to do nothing. That night, Nietzsche lay awake under the stars, thinking about a Mexican widow who had taught him more about being a leader in a few weeks than he had learned in years of warfare. She had shown him that real strength wasn't about dominating others. Real honor wasn't about following tradition blindly. And real courage sometimes meant admitting you were wrong and finding the strength to change. The lesson of medicine Elena taught the camp wasn't just about healing bodies. It was about healing hearts, opening minds, and questioning beliefs that perhaps should have been questioned long ago. Part 3. The Lesson of Medicine. The sickness came without warning, the way the worst things always do. One morning, a small girl named Little Bird woke up burning with fever. By afternoon, her younger brother was sick too. By evening, 3 more children in the camp were showing the same symptoms. Panic spread faster than the illness itself. The Apache had seen fevers like this before. Sometimes they passed quickly, leaving everyone tired but alive. Other times, they swept through camps like wildfire, taking the young and the old, leaving grief in their wake. The camp's medicine man had died the previous winter, an old man who took his knowledge to the grave because he had never finished training his replacement. Now they had no one who knew the sacred rituals, no one who understood which plants could fight fever, no one who could sing the healing songs. Nietzsche watched his people grow desperate. Mothers held their sick children, tears streaming down their faces, not knowing what to do. The elderly men tried to remember what the medicine man used to do, but memory was not the same as knowledge. They burned sage and said prayers, but the children kept getting worse. On the second day, Little Bird's fever spiked so high that she started having convulsions. Her small body shook violently while her mother screamed for someone to help. The whole camp gathered around, but no one knew what to do. They could only watch in horror as the little girl suffered. Then Elena pushed through the crowd. She had been watching from a distance, staying quiet as she always did when it came to Apache spiritual matters. But now, seeing the child dying, something in her broke open. "Let me try," she said. Her voice was quiet but firm. "I know medicine. I can help." The crowd turned to look at her. Some faces showed hope. Others showed suspicion. One of the senior warriors, an old man named Grey Wolf, stepped forward. "You are not Apache," he said. "Your medicine might anger the spirits. It might make things worse." Elena looked directly at him. "Right now, your children are dying. Your spirits have not stopped the sickness. What is there to lose by letting me try?" It was bold, almost disrespectful. But it was also true. Nietzsche, who had been standing at the edge of the crowd, made a decision. "Let her work," he said. "If the children die, they will die whether she helps or not. But if she can save them, we will have acted with wisdom, not fear." Grey Wolf looked unhappy but stepped back. Nietzsche's word was law, even when the old warrior disagreed with it. Elena knelt beside Little Bird. She placed her hand on the child's forehead, feeling the dangerous heat. She had seen this kind of fever before in her village. She knew it could kill, but she also knew it could be fought if treated quickly and correctly. "I need clean water as much as you can get," she said. "I need cloth for cooling, and I need to gather herbs from the land around camp. Someone needs to come with me to help carry them." 2 women volunteered immediately. They were mothers of sick children, willing to trust anyone who offered hope. Elena led them away from camp, moving quickly but carefully, searching the ground and the bushes for specific plants. She found wild mint, which could help reduce fever. She found yarrow, which would help the body fight infection. She found willow bark, which her husband had taught her was nature's gift against pain and heat. She gathered everything carefully, explaining to the women what each plant did, teaching them even in this moment of crisis. Back at camp, Elena set up a working space near the sick children. She boiled water and made it cool enough to drink but still warm. She crushed the herbs, mixing them in exact amounts her husband had taught her years ago. She made a tea that smelled bitter and strong. "This will taste bad," she told Little Bird's mother, "but you must make her drink it. Small sips every few minutes, even if she fights you." While the mother worked on getting medicine into her daughter, Elena prepared cool cloths soaked in mint water. She placed them on Little Bird's forehead, chest, and arms. The coolness would help bring down the fever from the outside while the herbs fought it from the inside. She moved to the next child, then the next, working without stopping. She showed the mothers exactly what to do, turning them into her assistants, teaching them her methods. She never rested, never ate, never complained about being tired. Nietzsche watched her work through that entire night. He saw how gentle she was with the children, how patient with the worried parents, how focused on every detail. She sang to the sick children, soft Spanish songs he didn't understand but that seemed to calm them. She checked each child every hour, feeling their foreheads, looking at their eyes, listening to their breathing. "The fever will break," she told him during one of her brief pauses, "but it takes time. They must drink the medicine regularly. They must stay cool, and we must watch them constantly." "How do you know it will break?" Nietzsche asked. "How can you be certain?" Elena looked at him with tired eyes. "I'm not certain. Medicine is not magic. Sometimes, despite everything we do, people die. But I have seen this fever before. I know that these herbs help. I know that cooling the body helps. And I know that giving up helps no one. 3 days and 3 nights Elena worked without real sleep. She took short naps only when mothers promised to wake her if anything changed. She checked on each child personally, adjusting their medicine, changing their cooling cloths, encouraging the parents to keep hope alive. On the morning of the 4th day, Little Bird opened her eyes. Her fever had broken during the night. She was weak and tired, but she was alive. Her mother wept with joy, holding her daughter close. Within hours, the other children began to improve too. The crisis was passing. The camp erupted in relief and celebration. Parents thanked Elena with tears and embraces. The women who had helped her felt pride in what they had learned. Even old Grey Wolf came to her, his face softening with respect. "You have saved Apache children," he said simply. "You have given life when we expected death. This is powerful medicine." Elena was so exhausted she could barely stand, but she managed a small smile. "It is not my medicine. It is medicine my husband taught me. Knowledge passed down through generations. Healing belongs to everyone who is willing to learn it." Nietzsche helped her back to her dwelling. She was swaying on her feet, ready to collapse. As she sat down, he brought her water and food. "You didn't have to do this," he said. "These are not your people. You owe us nothing. You could have let them die." Elena looked up at him, surprise clear on her face. "Let children die? What kind of person do you think I am? They are innocent. Their sickness is not their fault, and their suffering is real regardless of what tribe they belong to. But we are your captors," Nietzsche said, struggling to understand. "We took your freedom." "Yes," Elena agreed. "And that is wrong. But adding more wrong to the world by letting children die would not make anything right. 2 wrongs never make a right. That's what my husband used to say." Nietzsche sat in silence, absorbing her words. He had grown up believing in clear lines between friend and enemy, between his people and others. But Elena was showing him that some things crossed all lines. Healing was one of them. Compassion was another. Basic human decency was a third. Over the following days, the change in camp was remarkable. The women began treating Elena differently. She was no longer just a captive. She was the healer who had saved their children. They brought her small gifts, extra food, a better blanket. They asked her to teach them about medicine, and she agreed eagerly, happy to pass on knowledge that could help others. The warriors, even those who had been suspicious before, now nodded respectfully when she passed. She had proven her worth in a way they couldn't argue with. She had saved Apache lives when she could have simply stayed quiet and let fate take its course. But the biggest change was in Nietzsche himself. He found himself thinking about Elena's words constantly. About right and wrong. About how 2 wrongs never make a right. About how innocent people shouldn't suffer regardless of tribal conflicts or traditions. He began watching how other captives in the camp were treated. He noticed things he had never paid attention to before. The fear in their eyes, the way they flinched when warriors came near, the hopelessness that hung over them like a dark cloud, and for the first time in his life he felt ashamed of traditions he had never questioned before. One evening, Elena was preparing medicine for the children who were still recovering. Nietzsche approached her, something weighing heavy on his mind. "What you did for those children," he began, choosing his words carefully. "It showed more honor than any battle I've ever fought." Elena paused in her work, looking at him with those penetrating dark eyes. "Honor is not about fighting," she said gently. "Honor is about doing the right thing even when it costs you something. Even when no one is watching. Even when it would be easier to do nothing." That night, Nietzsche lay awake under the stars, thinking about a Mexican widow who had taught him more about being a leader in a few weeks than he had learned in years of warfare. She had shown him that real strength wasn't about dominating others. Real honor wasn't about following tradition blindly. And real courage sometimes meant admitting you were wrong and finding the strength to change. The lesson of medicine Elena taught the camp wasn't just about healing bodies. It was about healing hearts, opening minds, and questioning beliefs that perhaps should have been questioned long ago. Part 4. The question of honor. 2 months had passed since Elena saved the children. The late autumn wind was starting to blow cold across the Arizona territory, and the camp was preparing for the harder months ahead. Life had settled into a new rhythm, and Elena had become an accepted part of the community in ways no one expected when she first arrived. Nietzsche found himself seeking her out more often. At first, he told himself it was just to discuss camp matters. to make sure she had what she needed for her healing work. But the truth was different, and he knew it. He was drawn to her wisdom, to the way she saw the world through eyes that had suffered but refused to become bitter. Their conversations happened mostly in the evenings, after the day's work was done and the camp was settling down for the night. They would sit near the fire, close enough to talk quietly without others hearing, far enough apart to maintain proper distance. One evening, after they had been talking about small things like weather and supplies, Naiche found himself speaking about something he had never discussed with anyone. "You know," he began, staring into the fire rather than looking at her. "When I was young, my father taught me that a warrior's honor is everything. It's more important than life itself. A man without honor is not really a man at all." Elena listened without interrupting, a skill she had that made people want to tell her things they kept hidden from others. "He taught me that honor comes from courage in battle, from protecting your people, from following the ways of our ancestors without question. That's what it means to be Apache." Naiche paused, trying to find the right words for what he was feeling. "But lately I wonder if I really understand what honor means." "What makes you question it?" Elena asked gently. Naiche finally looked at her. "You, watching you. You have nothing. No freedom, no possessions, no power. By my people's measure, you should have no honor at all. But you carry yourself with more dignity than most warriors I know. You saved children who belong to the people holding you captive. You teach freely without asking for anything in return. You work hard every day without complaint. If that's not honor, then I don't know what is." Elena was quiet for a moment, her face thoughtful in the firelight. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clear. "Can I tell you something that might offend you?" "Speak freely," Naiche said. "I want to hear the truth, not polite words." Elena took a breath. "You speak of honor as a warrior, of protecting your people and following your ancestors' ways. But Naiche, what honor is there in keeping people in chains? What honor is there in treating human beings as property that can be bought and sold? How can you speak of dignity and courage while denying these things to others?" Her words hit him like arrows, each one finding its mark. He felt anger rise in his chest, then fade just as quickly. She wasn't attacking him. She was asking him real questions that he needed to face. "It's our way," he said, but even to his own ears it sounded weak. "Captives are part of Apache tradition. They have always been part of how we survive. The strong take from the weak. That's the way of the world, not just our people." "Is it?" Elena challenged, her eyes meeting his directly. "Or is that just what the strong tell themselves to excuse their actions? My husband used to say something that I think about often. He said, 'True honor is treating others as you wish to be treated, regardless of power.' It's easy to be good to people who can help you or hurt you. The real test of character is how you treat those who have no power over you at all." Naiche felt something crack inside his chest. It was like she had reached in and touched something he had kept buried for years. "What would you have me do? Free all the captives? That would go against everything my people believe. The warriors would never accept it. I would lose my position as chief." "I'm not telling you what to do," Elena said. "I'm just asking you to think about what honor really means. Does it mean following tradition without question, even when your heart tells you something is wrong? Or does it mean having the courage to change when change is needed?" They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. Around them, the camp was quiet except for the usual night sounds of people settling down to sleep. But inside Naiche's mind, everything was loud and chaotic. He thought about his father, about all the lessons he had learned as a young man. He thought about the pride he felt in being Apache, in carrying on the ways of his people. But he also thought about Elena standing in the camp that first day, chains on her wrists but strength in her eyes. He thought about her saving Apache children without hesitation. He thought about the quiet dignity she showed every single day despite having every reason to be angry and bitter. "How do you do it?" he asked suddenly. "How do you not hate us? How can you help us, teach us, work alongside us when we took everything from you?" Elena smiled, but it was a sad smile. "I did hate you. All of you. When I first arrived, I hated so much that it burned inside me like the fever that took those children. I wanted to watch you all suffer. I wanted to refuse to help, to let bad things happen if they would. What changed? I realized that hate was destroying me, not you," Elena said. "It was eating me alive from the inside. And I remembered something else my husband taught me. He said that we cannot control what happens to us, but we can always control who we are. I could become bitter and angry. Let this experience turn me into someone ugly inside. Or I could remain the person I was raised to be, someone who heals and helps and treats others with kindness even when they don't deserve it. We don't deserve it, Nietzsche said quietly. No, Elena agreed. You don't, but I do this for me, not for you. I do it because it allows me to look at myself with respect. Because it lets me sleep at night knowing I stayed true to my values even when everything else was taken from me. Nietzsche absorbed her words like earth absorbing rain after a long drought. He understood something then that he had never grasped before. Honor wasn't something others gave you for being strong or brave or victorious. Honor was something you gave yourself by living according to principles that went deeper than tradition or convenience. Over the next weeks, this conversation haunted him. He found himself looking at everything with new eyes. When he saw the other captives in camp, people who had been invisible to him before, he now saw human beings with their own stories, their own losses, their own pain. When he listened to warriors boasting about raids and captives taken, he heard the words differently. He started having conversations with Elena more regularly, asking her questions about her life before, about her husband who seemed to have been a wise man, about what she believed was right and wrong. She never preached or lectured. She just shared her thoughts honestly, leaving him to draw his own conclusions. One night Nietzsche asked her about strength. In my world, he said, the strongest man is the one who defeats his enemies, who takes what he wants, who bends others to his will. But you seem to believe something different. I do, Elena confirmed. My husband taught me that anyone can be strong when they have power. The real test of strength is how you act when you have power over those who are powerless. Do you use that power to lift others up or push them down? Do you see their humanity or just their usefulness to you? A truly strong person doesn't need to dominate others to feel powerful. These words settled into Nietzsche's soul like seeds in good soil. They grew there slowly at first, then faster, putting down roots that changed the way he saw everything. He began to understand that the honor his father taught him about was incomplete. It was the honor of warriors, of battle, of survival in a harsh world. But there was another kind of honor that Elena represented. It was quieter, gentler, but no less powerful. It was the honor of treating all people with basic human dignity, the honor of doing right even when no one was watching, the honor of staying true to your values even when it cost you everything. And Nietzsche realized, with a feeling that was both painful and liberating, that he wanted that kind of honor more than any victory in battle could give him. The question was no longer whether his traditions were right or wrong. The question was whether he had the courage to be the kind of leader who could change those traditions when they needed changing. Whether he could face the anger of his warriors, the confusion of his people, and the weight of generations of Apache history, and still do what his heart was slowly, painfully learning was right. It was the hardest question Nietzsche had ever faced, and he knew that how he answered it would define not just his leadership, but his entire life. Part 5. The raid's aftermath winter had arrived in the Arizona territory, bringing cold nights and the constant need for supplies. Food was running low, and the camp needed resources to survive the harsh months ahead. Nietzsche and a group of his best warriors rode out on a raid into Mexican territory, something they had done countless times before. But this time felt different to Nietzsche. As he rode, he kept thinking about his conversations with Elena, about honor and strength and what it really meant to be a leader. He pushed these thoughts aside, telling himself that his people's survival came first. He had responsibilities. He couldn't let philosophical questions interfere with practical necessities. The raid went as planned. They found a small settlement, took supplies, and captured a few people to bring back to camp. Among them was a young boy, maybe 10 years old, with frightened eyes and tears streaming down his face. He cried for his mother the whole journey back, a sound that cut through Nietzsche like a knife he couldn't pull out. When they arrived back at camp, there was the usual celebration. Successful raids meant food, supplies, and proof that the Apache were still strong despite increasing pressure from American soldiers and Mexican forces. The warriors were proud, the people were relieved, and everything should have felt normal. But Nietzsche couldn't shake the image of that boy's face. The terror, the tears, the way he called for his mother in a language Nietzsche didn't speak, but understood perfectly anyway. Every child knew that word. Every child needed their mother. He expected Elena to take the boy under her care as she had with other captives, to feed him and calm him and teach him to accept his new situation. Instead, when she saw the child, Something broke in her that Naiche had never seen break before. She came to him that evening, and for the first time since arriving at the camp, she was openly crying. Not quiet tears she hid away, but deep, shaking sobs that came from a place of profound pain. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "Please, Naiche. This boy has a mother somewhere who is dying inside right now. She's exactly where I was when they took my husband from me. She's feeling pain so deep that she can't breathe, can't think, can't imagine how she will survive the next moment. You have the power to end this. You have the power to spare her that suffering." Naiche felt defensive. "It's one boy. We have always taken captives. This is no different from any other raid." "But it is different," Elena insisted, her eyes red from crying. "It's different because now you know better. You've questioned these traditions yourself. I've heard you, Naiche. I know you've been thinking about what's right and what's wrong. You can't unknow what you now know. You can't unfeel what you now feel." "My warriors expect me to bring back captives," Naiche argued, but his words sounded hollow even to himself. "They expect me to follow Apache ways. If I return the boy, they will think I'm weak. They will lose respect for me." Elena wiped her tears and looked at him with an intensity that made him unable to look away. "I never told you this, but my husband and I wanted children. We tried for 10 years. Every month I hoped, and every month I was disappointed. We never had a child of our own. But I had nieces and nephews, children I loved like they were mine." Her voice grew softer, more painful. "When bandits destroyed our village, those children died. I heard their screams. I saw their small bodies. And I could do nothing to save them. Nothing. The helplessness of that moment has haunted me every day since." She pointed toward where the boy was being kept. "That child is someone's nephew, someone's grandson, someone's whole world. His mother is somewhere right now experiencing the worst pain a parent can feel. And you have the power to stop it. You can give her back her son. You can spare that woman the torture I live with every day, the torture of knowing children you loved are gone forever." Naiche felt like he was standing at the edge of a cliff, and Elena was asking him to jump. Everything he knew, everything he had been taught, everything his people expected of him said he should keep the boy. But everything he had been learning, everything Elena had been teaching him, everything his own heart was whispering said something else entirely. "If I do this," he said slowly, "it will change everything. The warriors will question my leadership. The people will wonder if I have lost my mind. Some will say you have bewitched me with your foreign ideas." "Maybe I have," Elena said with a sad smile. "Or maybe I've just helped you see what was already in your heart all along. You are a good man, Naiche. I have seen it. You care about your people. You want to do right by them. But there are different ways to be strong, different ways to lead, and sometimes the bravest thing a leader can do is to break with tradition when tradition is causing unnecessary suffering." That night, Naiche barely slept. He thought about his father, about what the old man would say if he could see his son now. He thought about Thunderfoot, the war horse he had traded for Elena, and wondered if that trade had set all of this in motion. He thought about the boy crying for his mother, and about Elena's face when she spoke of the children she had lost. By morning, his decision was made. It terrified him, but it also felt right in a way nothing had felt right in months. He gathered his warriors and told them he was taking the boy back to his village. The reaction was exactly what he expected: anger, confusion, accusations of weakness. The younger warriors were especially upset, feeling that he was disrespecting the success of their raid. But Naiche stood firm. When they accused him of being bewitched by the Mexican woman, he didn't deny it. "Yes," he said, "she has changed my thinking. She saved our children when they were dying. She has worked harder than anyone in this camp without complaint. She has shown more strength in captivity than many warriors show in freedom. Maybe we should listen to what she has taught us." He called for a council meeting that evening, knowing he needed to address the entire band, not just the warriors. When they gathered, he spoke with more honesty than he had ever shown before. "I know you think I have gone soft," he began. "I know you believe I am abandoning Apache ways. But I ask you to hear me out. We are a people under siege. The American army hunts us from the north. The Mexican forces hunt us from the south. Our numbers grow smaller every year. Our children grow up knowing only war and running and hiding. Is this the future we want?" He paused, looking at the faces around the fire. Some were angry, some were curious, all were listening. "We have always been warriors. We have always been strong. But what is strength? Is it only the ability to take from others? Or is it also the ability to show mercy? To choose peace when war would be easier? To think about the consequences of our actions beyond just today? He told them about the boy, about his mother who was suffering, about how returning the child would show they were not mindless raiders, but people capable of compassion. He spoke about survival not just through fighting, but through building alliances, through showing they could be trusted to do the right thing. The council was divided. Grey Wolf, the senior warrior who had doubted Elena before she saved the children, surprised everyone by speaking in support of Nietzsche's decision. The woman's medicine saved our young ones. Maybe her wisdom can save us in other ways too. Maybe being strong doesn't always mean taking. Sometimes it means giving back. Not everyone agreed. Some warriors remained angry, feeling that Nietzsche was betraying everything they stood for. But enough respected his leadership, or at least were willing to see where this path led, that the council allowed him to proceed. 3 days later, Nietzsche rode out with the boy. Elena had prepared the child, cleaning him up, feeding him well, making sure he understood he was going home. When Nietzsche told her he was returning the boy, she had wept again, but this time with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "You will never know what this means. Not just to that boy and his mother, but to your own soul." The journey to return the boy took 2 days. When they reached his village, the mother's reaction was everything Elena had predicted. She screamed with joy, ran to her son, collapsed on her knees holding him and thanking God and weeping so hard she couldn't speak. The whole village came out, amazed that the Apache chief had returned a captive unharmed. Nietzsche explained simply that the boy was too young, that he did not belong in an Apache camp, that he was returning him out of respect for a mother's love. The village elders were shocked. They offered gifts, which Nietzsche refused. They asked what he wanted in return. He said nothing except that they remember this act of mercy. On the ride back to camp, Nietzsche felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Real, deep peace that came from knowing he had done something truly right. Not right according to tradition or expectation, but right according to a deeper law that transcended tribal boundaries and ancient customs. When he returned to camp, Elena was waiting. She didn't say anything. She just looked at him with such profound respect and gratitude that words weren't necessary. In that moment, Nietzsche understood that he had crossed a line he could never uncross. He had made a choice that changed not just his actions, but his entire understanding of what kind of leader he wanted to be. And surprisingly, he felt no regret. Only a strange sense of freedom, as if he had been carrying a weight he didn't even know was there and had finally set it down. Part 6. The Council's Challenge. The tension in the camp after Nietzsche returned the boy was thick enough to cut with a knife. Word had spread quickly about what he had done, and opinions were sharply divided. Some saw it as a sign of wisdom and mercy. Others saw it as dangerous weakness that could destroy them all. 3 of the senior warriors, led by a fierce man named Red Sky, called for a formal council meeting. This was their right under Apache law. When important decisions affected the whole band, the people had the right to discuss them openly. But everyone knew this wasn't just a discussion. This was a challenge to Nietzsche's leadership. The meeting was set for the evening of the new moon, a traditional time for important decisions. As the day approached, Nietzsche could feel the camp splitting into factions. Families whispered in their dwellings. Warriors had tense conversations in small groups. Even the children seemed to sense that something big was happening. Elena kept her distance during this time, knowing that her presence would only inflame things further. But she watched Nietzsche carefully, worried about what this challenge might mean for him. She had seen men lose their positions as leaders before. Sometimes it ended peacefully. Sometimes it didn't. The night of the council arrived cold and clear. The entire band gathered around a large fire, forming a circle according to custom. The elders sat in places of honor. The warriors stood or sat based on their rank and reputation. Women and older children filled in the remaining spaces. Everyone had the right to witness what would be decided here. Red Sky stood first. He was a warrior in his 40s, scarred from many battles, respected for his courage and his rigid adherence to Apache traditions. He wasted no time getting to his point. "Our chief has made a decision that threatens our way of life," he began, his voice carrying across the circle. "He returned a captive, Not just any captive, but a boy who could have been raised as Apache, who could have strengthened our numbers. He did this because a Mexican woman asked him to. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Red Sky continued, his tone growing more intense. Brothers and sisters, we are a people under attack. The white soldiers grow stronger every year. The Mexican army never stops hunting us. We cannot afford weakness. We cannot afford a leader who shows mercy to our enemies' children, while our own children go hungry. Other warriors who shared his views spoke up, adding their voices to the challenge. They talked about tradition, about the Apache way, about how their ancestors would be ashamed to see a chief acting with such softness. They pointed out that returning captives was not their custom, that it showed disrespect for the risks the warriors had taken on the raid. One younger warrior, emboldened by the others, went even further. The Mexican woman has bewitched our chief. She has filled his mind with foreign ideas. She has made him forget he is Apache. Perhaps we need a leader who remembers who he is and who his people are. The implication was clear. They weren't just challenging Nietzsche's decision. They were challenging his right to remain chief. When the challengers finished speaking, Nietzsche stood. The firelight caught his face, showing the lines of stress and sleeplessness from the past weeks. But his eyes were clear and his voice was steady. Everything you say about our situation is true, he began, surprising everyone. We are under attack. We are hunted. Our numbers grow smaller. Our children do grow up knowing hunger and danger. These are facts I cannot deny. He paused, letting his words settle. But I ask you this, how is what we have always done working for us? Are we stronger than we were 10 years ago? 20 years ago? Or are we weaker, fewer, more desperate with each passing season? The crowd stirred. This was not the defensive response they expected. You say I have forgotten I'm Apache, but I say I remember exactly what it means to be Apache. Our ancestors were not just warriors. They were survivors. They adapted to changes in weather, in game, in enemies. They learned new things and incorporated them into our ways. Being Apache has always meant being strong enough to change when change was needed. Nietzsche began walking around the inside of the circle, making eye contact with different people as he spoke. Yes, Elena has changed my thinking, and I am grateful for it. She saved our children when they were dying. She taught us medicine we had lost when our medicine man died. She has worked harder than anyone here without complaint. And yes, she has taught me things about honor and strength that I never learned in battle. He stopped in front of Red Sky. You say showing mercy is weakness. I say it takes more courage to show mercy than to show cruelty. Any man can kill or capture. Any warrior can take from the weak. But it takes a truly strong man to choose another path when everyone expects violence. Grey Wolf, the elder who had begun to support Nietzsche's changes, stood up.
Speak your mind fully, Chief. Tell us what you really see for our future.
Tell us why returning that boy matters. Nietzsche nodded gratefully. This was the opening he needed. I see a future where we are all dead or on reservations, he said bluntly, shocking the crowd with his honesty. That is where our current path leads. We cannot defeat the American army. We cannot defeat the Mexican forces. We are outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of places to hide. The crowd erupted in angry shouts. Warriors jumped to their feet. People demanded to know how their chief could speak so hopelessly. But Nietzsche raised his hand and gradually the noise died down. But I also see another future, he continued, his voice growing stronger. A future where we are known not just as warriors but as people of honor. Where our enemies know that we keep our word, that we show mercy when we can, that we are people they can negotiate with, even respect. This doesn't mean we stop defending ourselves. It doesn't mean we become weak. It means we become smart. He pointed toward the direction of the village where he had returned the boy. That village will remember that an Apache chief returned a child to his mother. They will tell that story. Other villages will hear it. And when the time comes, and it will come, when we need to make peace, when we need allies, when we need someone to speak for us to the authorities, maybe some of those people will remember our mercy and show us mercy in return. An old woman, mother to several warriors, stood up. What about our way of life? What about our traditions? If we start questioning everything, what will be left of who we are? It was a fair question, and Nietzsche respected her for asking it. Our traditions have kept us strong for generations. I honor them, but I also believe that traditions should serve the people, not the other way around. If a tradition helps us survive and stay true to our values, we should keep it. But if a tradition leads us to actions that make survival harder, that contradict the very values we claim to hold, then maybe that tradition needs to change. He turned to face the entire circle. I am not saying we should abandon everything. I am saying we should think carefully about each tradition and ask ourselves, does this help us or hurt us? Does this make us stronger or weaker? Does this honor the best of what it means to be Apache? Or does it just honor the past without considering the future? A middle-aged warrior named Swift Fox, who had remained silent until now, stood up. You speak of the future, Chief. But what specific future are you proposing? What would you have us do differently? This was the crucial moment. Nietzsche took a deep breath. I propose that we stop taking captives for labor, that we treat prisoners of war with respect and either release them or negotiate exchanges, that we focus our raids on supplies we need, not on taking people, that we send messages to the American and Mexican authorities saying we are willing to negotiate for peace if they will negotiate fairly with us. The crowd exploded. Half the people were shouting in support, half in anger. Warriors argued with each other. Women debated loudly. It was chaos for several minutes until Grey Wolf stood and called for silence. Enough, the old warrior said. The chief has spoken his mind. Now the council must decide. Do we follow this new path he suggests? Do we replace him with a leader who will follow the old ways more strictly? Or do we find some middle ground? The debate went on for hours. People shared their fears, their hopes, their anger, their support. Elena, watching from outside the circle where captives were supposed to stay, felt tears running down her face. Not for herself, but for Nietzsche, who was risking everything to do what he believed was right. Finally, as the night grew late and the fire burned low, Grey Wolf called for a decision. Those who support the chief and his new direction stand on his right. Those who oppose him and want to return to the old ways completely stand on his left. Those who are uncertain remain seated. People began to move. It was tense, families splitting, friends taking different sides. When everyone had chosen their position, they counted. The result was close, painfully close. But slightly more people stood on Nietzsche's right than on his left. A significant number remained seated, unwilling to commit either way. Grey Wolf announced the decision. The council has spoken. Chief Nietzsche will continue to lead, and he will be allowed to try his new path. But he raised his hand as some people began to cheer. This is not absolute support. If this new way leads to disaster, if our people suffer because of these changes, the council can be called again. The chief must prove that his vision can work. Nietzsche accepted this with a nod. Part 8. The true meaning 5 years passed. 5 years that changed everything and nothing all at once. Elena did stay with the Apache camp, though not continuously. She would sometimes leave for weeks at a time, visiting other communities, treating the sick wherever she found them. But she always came back. The camp had become her home in a way no place had been since her village was destroyed. Not because she was forced to be there, but because she chose to be there. That choice made all the difference. Her reputation as a healer grew beyond the Apache camp. People in nearby Mexican villages heard about the woman who had once been a captive, but stayed as a free healer. They came seeking her help, bringing gifts in payment, treating her with respect that crossed the boundaries of tribe and nationality. She became a bridge between worlds that had only known conflict before. Nietzsche never did get another war horse to replace Thunderfoot. The life of constant raiding and warfare was slowly ending, whether the Apache wanted it to or not. The American government was pushing harder, the reservations were becoming inevitable, and survival meant adapting to a world that was changing faster than anyone could have imagined. But Nietzsche gained something more valuable than any horse. He gained a reputation as a chief who could be trusted, who kept his word, who showed mercy when he could have shown cruelty. This reputation saved lives when negotiations with authorities happened. It created alliances with Mexican villages that once would have been only enemies. It gave his people options they wouldn't have had otherwise. The camp itself changed too. The practice of taking captives for labor ended completely. Some of the older warriors never accepted this change and eventually left to join other bands that held to the old ways more strictly. But new people joined too, drawn by stories of a chief who led with wisdom rather than just strength. Elena established a proper healing lodge, a place where anyone could come for treatment regardless of who they were or where they came from. Apache, Mexican, even occasionally American settlers who had heard of her skills. She trained other women in the camp, passing on the knowledge her husband had given her. making sure it wouldn't be lost when she was gone. Over those 5 years, Elena and Nietzsche's relationship deepened into something neither could easily name. They were not romantic partners. The wounds of her captivity, the reality of their history, the complexities of their positions all made that impossible. But they were something. Friend seemed too small a word. Teacher and student didn't capture it either. They were two souls who had changed each other fundamentally, who trusted each other completely, who relied on each other's wisdom in ways that went beyond any simple label. They still had their evening conversations, sitting by fires and talking about everything and nothing, about the future that was coming whether anyone wanted it or not, about the past that couldn't be changed but could be learned from, about the meaning of honor and strength and what it meant to live a good life in a world that often rewarded the opposite. One evening in late autumn, as they sat by the river that ran near camp, Nietzsche spoke about something that had been weighing on him. "The reservation is coming," he said bluntly. "Maybe this year, maybe next, but it's coming. The government will not allow us to stay free much longer. Too many bands are still raiding. Too many soldiers want to prove themselves by defeating the Apache. We cannot win this fight." Elena had known this was true, but hearing Nietzsche say it out loud made it real in a new way. "What will you do?" "I will negotiate the best terms I can," Nietzsche said. "I will try to keep our people together, keep our families intact. I will ask for land that can support us, for the right to maintain some of our ways. But in the end we will go to a reservation and life as we have known it will end." "I'm sorry," Elena said softly. "I know what that costs." Nietzsche looked at her, really looked at her, seeing all the years written in the lines of her face, the gray starting to show in her dark hair. "You know, when I traded Thunderfoot for you, I thought I was making a terrible mistake. I felt like I had lost something precious and gained something I didn't want and didn't know what to do with." "And now?" Elena asked. "Now I understand that trade was the best thing I ever did, though not for any reason I expected. You changed my life, Elena. You changed who I am as a man and as a leader. You taught me things I desperately needed to learn but was too blind to see on my own." Elena smiled, a soft smile full of complicated emotions. "You changed my life too. When I arrived here in chains, I thought my life was over. I thought I would just survive day to day until I died. But instead I found purpose again. I found meaning. I found that even in the worst circumstances we can choose who we want to be. You gave me my freedom," she continued, "but I gave you something greater. I gave you the chance to become the man you were meant to be. The man who questions traditions when they need questioning. The man who chooses right over easy. The man who understands that true honor has nothing to do with power over others." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the water flow past. The river, Nietzsche thought, was like time. It kept moving forward whether you were ready or not. You could fight against it, but eventually you would be carried along anyway. The wise thing was to learn to move with it while staying true to yourself. The day finally came when government representatives arrived to negotiate reservation terms. Nietzsche met with them, using all the skills he had learned over years of difficult conversations and hard decisions. He surprised them by being reasonable, by understanding the reality of the situation, by negotiating for practical things rather than impossible demands. The reputation he had built over 5 years helped. Stories had reached the authorities about the Apache chief who returned captives, who freed prisoners, who could be trusted to keep his word. It wasn't enough to prevent the reservation. Nothing could prevent that, but it was enough to get better terms than other bands received. Land that wasn't the worst, promises of supplies that might actually be kept, the right to stay together as a band rather than being scattered. When the final agreement was signed, Nietzsche called his people together. Red Sky and his supporters had left years ago, unable to accept the changes. But those who remained had chosen to follow Nietzsche's path, to try to adapt to the new world, while keeping what was most important about the old. "My brothers and sisters," Nietzsche addressed them, his voice carrying the weight of leadership and loss. "Tomorrow we begin the journey to reservation land. I know many of you see this as defeat. In some ways it is. We are losing the freedom to roam, to hunt where we choose, to live as our ancestors lived." He paused, looking at faces he had known for years, people he had led through countless challenges. "But we are not defeated in the ways that matter most. We are still Apache. We still have our families, our values, our identity. We survived not by being the strongest warriors, but by being strong enough to change when change was necessary. Elena stood at the edge of the gathering, no longer an outsider but a respected member of the community. She caught Nietzsche's eye and he nodded slightly, acknowledging her presence, her influence, everything she represented in his life and leadership. "We will face hardships on the reservation," Nietzsche continued. "Life will be difficult in ways we cannot yet imagine, but we will face them together, and we will survive them the way we have survived everything else, by adapting, by being smart, by remembering who we are while being willing to become what we need to be." The journey to the reservation took 2 weeks. It was a somber march, full of grief for what was being left behind, but it was also peaceful, without the constant fear of attack, without children crying from hunger or exhaustion from endless running. There was something to be said for that peace, even if it came at a terrible price. Elena walked alongside the Apache, neither ahead nor behind, just one person among many making the same difficult journey. She had been offered the chance to go to a Mexican town, to start fresh away from all of this, but she refused. These were her people now as much as anyone could be her people. She would go where they went, heal who needed healing, and continue the work her husband had taught her was the highest calling any person could have. On the reservation, life was hard, just as Nietzsche had warned. The promised supplies often didn't come. The land wasn't as good as they had been told. Government officials came and went, some trying to help, most just trying to do their jobs without caring about the human cost. But Nietzsche's band survived better than many others. They had learned flexibility. They had learned to work together. They had learned that survival sometimes meant swallowing pride and accepting help, even from former enemies. The relationships Nietzsche had built over the years, the reputation for honesty and mercy, paid dividends in small but important ways. Elena's healing lodge became a place not just for Apache but for anyone on or near the reservation who needed medical help. She trained more healers, both Apache and Mexican, creating a legacy that would outlive her. She never remarried, never tried to reclaim the life she had lost. She built a new life instead, one that honored her husband's memory by continuing his work in ways he never could have imagined. Years passed. Nietzsche grew older, his hair graying, his body bearing the scars of a lifetime of hardship.